Hi, you with Julian on the brown note, starting again after that absolute hell from God knows what. Torture. You're with Julian, and I'm counting down my best and worst movies of the year in 2022, which was a pretty poor year all up. It wasn't that entertaining. It was, even the bad films. If you know this show, you'll know I like doing the bad films more than I like praising the good ones. And this is... every year I do my top albums of the year, top tracks of the year, and films of the year. And this has been completely ruined by me doing the top 200 tracks of the year over 10 weeks. So we're 1 week away from Christmas, and normally that would be it. Everything would have been done and dusted, but I'm just starting my awards season because of that only ending last week after 2.5 months. So welcome to the first of the award season shows after that torturous double start there from my laptop dying with all of the information on the show. So it's going to be a lot of winging it, even for me. So there's a couple of things that I would like to get out of the way. One is that I'm just me, and I do politics and movie reviews and radio show and album reviews and stuff like that. I work full time. I don't have time to see every film that's out, and I don't see every film that's out. All this is the best and worst movies I have seen, which won't compare to anyone else's lists because they're proper film critics and they see everything. But I really wanted to use the opening to bash film critics. Their top 10 lists are absolutely redundant and have been for a number of years, not because I'm better than them or being snobby or being anti-snobby, which is even worse, but because they see films at festivals that only 10 people go to. Even someone like Mark Kermode, who's like a big mainstream film guy, I looked at his top 10 films of the year and I didn't recognise 8 of the names. So they watch films that play at a festival. So if you weren't one of the 400 people to have gone to that, you probably haven't seen that film. They have films in their top 10 that don't come out on wide release until next year. Can you imagine having your top 10 albums of the year and only you and say a few hundred people have actually, or even a few thousand people have even heard it, or it doesn't actually come out properly for a year? So it's so redundant. All I can promise is that the majority of films I'm going to talk about today will be films that most people have seen, at least 80% of them. So I'm going to do, because I only get 15 films worth mentioning at all, there's going to be 2 other elements. One of those is my most underrated films of the year. There's about 5 of those. And my favourite part of the show, which we'll take a break for later on, if I'm still going, and that's going to be the 10 worst films of the year. And the first chunk being my 15th ranked film of the year is the movie Fall, which is where the track I played at the start of the show came from. Now, it's an indie action adventure film, I guess you'd call it. It's directed by Scott Mann. I don't know anything else. Stars Grace, Caroline Curry and Virginia Gardner, basically a two-hander. And it starts with 2 girls and a boy who's fiancé with one of the girls trying to climb an impossible peak, and the guy falling to his death. Winds forward a year, and the fiancée is in the pits of manic depression and despair and drinking herself to death. And the other friend turns up to G her up and says, let's go and climb this telecoms tower in the middle of the desert in America, which is based on a real thing. And some of these telecoms towers, they're like 5 of them are in the 10 tallest structures ever built by man. It's like a 2,000 foot tall tower that's straight up. And they climb it and then they get trapped at the top. And there is no way down. And that's the rest of the movie. I really like this. I thought it was underappreciated. Some of the reasons why is it doesn't rely on height scares as much as you think. I read some of the reviews that said that's all it does all the way through. Not even close. It uses them judiciously. As someone that's scared of heights, it certainly does. And it uses them increasingly towards the climax. There's a love triangle in it, which is obvious from the start for cynical people like me. But when it does arrive, it's matter of fact. It's almost like the two girls have more important things to deal with. We say certainly do. And I thought both those girls, Virginia Gardner and Grace Caroline Curry, were excellent in their roles. I thought that it was really well shot. The atmosphere was great. It was well paced. I don't agree that it was repetitive. Like, some of the reviews seem to have not actually watched the film because it sort of bypassed some of those possibilities, having a short story length plot spread too thin, too much reliance on hanging off things. I didn't really get that from the film. I thought the characters were really well developed. The trials and tribulations they went through were, well, again, varied and well paced, and it built up to an excellent climax. So, well worth a watch at number 15. At number 14, I am the only person in the universe that gave Oscar winner David O. Russell of Silver Lining Playbooks and American Hustle fame. His latest film, Amsterdam, got the worst reviews of his career. It absolutely tanked, lost about $100 million. And you can see why in the opening sort of half hour. It is baffling. The tone, everything about it is off. Nothing seems to work. But the more I existed in its world, the more it made sense. It is very odd, even the look on people's faces, the way the camera's zooming in at the start. It's like it's got this de-aging technology going into overdrive. But the rest is, I just got sucked into a world. Very, very high-class cast. Christian Bale, Margot Robbie, John, who are both were great. John David Washington, Denzel's son, still not really confirmed that he's a great actor. Chris Rock, Anya Taylor-Joy, who along with Margot Robbie is having a ball making this film. Zoe Saldana, Mike Myers, Michael Shannon, Timothy Olyphant, Taylor Swift, Matthias Schoenaerts. It is Rami Malek. Robert De Niro has a really good role. It is a cast from heaven. But it's such an interesting, semi-true story about Nazis in America, high finance people banding together to try and overthrow any elected government and to align themselves with Italy and Germany at the start of World War II, which really happened. And it's such an interesting story, and it's such an interesting way it's presented. I've not seen a more obtuse or weird presentation of such a major film. So I was really, really impressed by that. It wasn't great, but I actually gave it, I think, an 8 out of 10. It's so unusual, and that's catnip for me. So I'm the only person that's going to include that in their lists. The horror film Smile, it came out around the same time as the much more lauded Barbarian, which I didn't rate at all. Smile is nowhere near as original as Barbarian, but it does a number of things that Barbarian doesn't. It's for a start, it scares all the way through from the opening scene. It builds up a sense of dread that Barbarian doesn't have. It has excellent use of jump scares continually throughout, which are overused in many a film where you see them coming. And this one he's got a great knack, or the Parker Finn, debut director, he's got a great knack for doing a feint on a jump scare where it lures you in and gives you enough time to relax again before hitting you with it. And above all, it has an absolutely superb central performance by Sosie Bacon, which is magnificent. She's really, really good as a psychiatrist come therapist who looks after people who are in terminal crisis People are, a danger to themselves, attacking people, pulled off the streets. And she gets sucked into this world through paranormal activity. So Smile was my 13th best film of the year. All the Old Knives, which is where that Cure song, Love Song, came from, I thought was a very underappreciated film. Sandy Newton and Chris Penn were star-crossed spies, and I thought the whole film's framed around a dinner they have. 10 years prior, there's a terrorist attack in Germany where they're both CIA agents, and everyone on board is killed. It's a tragedy, and they believe that there was a rat in the CIA. The next day, Sandy Newton leaves the guy that she's in love with, Chris Penn, and never sees him again. 10 years later, Chris Penn's still working for the CIA, and they've got new information on who the rat is, so he has to go and interview everyone connected. And the whole movie is framed around a dinner, the first meeting between Sandy Newton, who I don't think's been better in anything. I think this is, she's a 360-degree performance here, very human performance. And Chris Penn gets better and better. It's not Chris Penn, is it? Chris Pine. This is what happens when I don't have access to data. Chris Pine, not Chris Penn, the dead brother of Sean Penn. So I thought All the Old Knives, it's shot beautifully, even the dinner. It's in this stunning restaurant in Carmel County in America. And it's on the beach, and you get this amazing sunset come through the room where everyone lights up in red glow, and it's a really tragic story as well. So I thought that was massively underappreciated. And at number 11 is King Richard. Wow, isn't there a film that got a lot of acclaim and then got forgotten because of Will Smith getting up on stage and hitting Chris Rock in the face? At the time, I said that I thought Will Smith deserved the Oscar for it because his performance was so naturalistic in it. It wasn't sort of heart-tugging stuff. He just completely embodied everything about this guy, and what an amazing guy he was. The guy that coached his two daughters, Serena and Venus Williams, to global domination. Incredible story, really well-helmed film. Doesn't get a lot of what I expected to happen, like a lot of mawkishness and over-egging of things. It's only up until I think one of them wins their first major game. It's not like they go all the way through to Wimbledon. Really well put together, great performance by Will Smith. Now I have to work out, so I've done my first 5 of 15 to 11 best films. This is my 5 underrated films. So I'll do my worst films later. My underrated films are films that got a general pasting from everyone, but I actually appreciated. So some big budget stuff in there. That track was from Morbius. And Morbius was worth it just for the memes earlier this year. The latest in the sort of Marvel comic universe, or DC. I don't even care, to be honest. And Jared Leto, who I have often had a massive problem with trashing everything he's been in, like see Blade Runner 2049 or just about anything he's got a supporting role in. I didn't mind him in Morbius. I thought it was quick. I thought the other star in it was really good, the one that plays his brother. And I found it quite entertaining. I didn't really have a problem with it. I don't understand like the absolute trashing it got. It compared to second phase Marvel or fourth phase Marvel or whatever they're on, where everything's been dire. I actually thought it was reasonably good. And another one is on the big budget side, Jurassic World Dominion. I've trashed the Jurassic Park franchise because the first film was excellent and everything else has been dire. The second of this trilogy, so they relaunched it after 1, 2 and 3, they relaunched Jurassic World. The first one was abysmal with, I'm going to get the Chris's wrong again, Chris Pratt as the new lead guy. And what's the Bryce Dallas Howard? She is absolutely the star of the show, the heaving-bosomed heroine of Yesteryear We Never Get. She was undoubtedly the MVP throughout all 3 films. Well, the second one for me was half okay because of that whole volcano thing. It was all right. It was just when it moved on to dry land and it went back into, hey, everyone, let's get chased by a velociraptor and a T-Rex for a change. But this one did nothing of the sort. It went off on a global trip, more like a Mission Impossible come James Bond film, where they went from location to location. I thought the extra cast, not only the fact that they brought back Laura Dern and Jeff Goldblum and Sam Neill in this one, but the fact that that gave more characters room for story arcs, which the others haven't got. They've hewn so close to the first film's story arc. Whereas this one, and it didn't have any kids to spoil things in it. Not really. So I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was really interesting to look at, and we actually got a wide range of dinosaurs this time instead of relying on those same two for every film. Some really good effects. I enjoyed Jurassic World Dominion. Another film is Death on the Nile. I cannot stand Kenneth Branagh. I don't know why. I just can't stand his acting, apart from Harry Potter. And I've not really liked anything he's had anything to do with. I never saw Belfast last year. So I wasn't holding out hope. I saw the first one, which was Murder on the Orient Express, the first Agatha Christie Hercule Poirot reboot. And I thought it was awful. Absolutely terrible. First third of this one, Death on the Nile, I thought the same thing. But as it progressed, I actually got sucked into its world. I thought the cast was much more appealing. I thought the story was well handled and it looked good. And they gave Hercule Poirot much more to do emotionally. So we actually had a bit at the start where he falls in love with his nurse in the First World War, who is then killed, and he's, will never love again. He has a little bit more emotional lifting to do. Arnie Hammer as a star was magnificent. So Arnie Hammer was sort of airbrushed off the promotional material for, I think, eating people or something. So that's another of my underappreciated films of the year. The King's Man. Now, The Kingsman was amazing. The first one that came out about, this secret society of Colin Friel, these spies that work clandestinely for the British government and wear sharp suits and carry, bowler hats and umbrellas that are weapons and all of this. It was a real breath of fresh air. The second one, Kingsman 2, was absolutely atrocious, absolutely abysmal. So I held out no hope for the King's Spaceman. But I thought it was actually really good. Totally different tone. Very interesting story, which was sort of like blurring the lines between 50% factual, as in the origins of the First World War. Even started in the Boer War concentration camps, showing the British up to no good there. So it had some really interesting historical grounding. And I thought the story was really interesting. None of these films are masterpieces, but I did actually enjoy it. And the worst reviewed film on my list of underappreciated, underrated films this year is Firestarter, which actually has won a few worst films of the year polls, just like Amsterdam, my 14th best film. It was mainly terrible, but I thought if you're into like Stephen King and this kind of movie, the final third was absolutely fantastic. And it almost reminded me of the sort of last quarter of The Road, that bleak dystopian film with what happens to the child in it. And I actually thought it was really good. You're with Julian on the Brown Note, counting down my best and worst films of the year. So we had at number 15, Fall. At 14, the much maligned Amsterdam. At 13, Smile, excellent horror. All the Old Knives, really underappreciated, at 12. And the monumentally controversial King Richard, with Will Smith's infamous slap at number 11. So at number 10 in my best films of the year is The Cursed, which was a really underappreciated, very atmospheric horror film that came out earlier in the year. It features Roma people who put a curse on some land after they're butchered quite barbarically in this posh estate, and things akin to vampires and werewolf start happening, and they call in an outsider, someone like Charlie Hunnam. I can't remember who the guy is. I can actually have a look. I can't be bothered. He's brought in, he's lost his whole family to these creatures, and through a beautifully shot film, really atmospheric, very Think Country Manor, Misty Fog, Hounds of the Baskervilles sort of stuff. Some really gnarly violence and some gonzo bits as well. Very underappreciated, very atmospheric, and I thought it panned out really well. So The Curse at number 10. David Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future at number 9, which was, I guess, a dystopian future where people now get their bodies augmented, which is David Cronenberg, after many years going back to body horror, likes of Videodrome or Crash, and it references the greatest hits of his career in that manner. So you get this combination of sex and death and body adjustments, all relating to erotica and everything like this. First time I've seen Kristen Stewart be the best actress in a film ever. I thought she was fantastic. I thought everyone in it was really, really good, and very dark, yet accessible for Cronenberg, and didn't pull any punches either, didn't make itself accessible, but was quite an interesting story. So I thought that was an underappreciated film. My 9th best of the year. At number 8, I will look up some info for this. The Outfit, another criminally underappreciated film, which featured basically one room, but it didn't look like it featured one room. One of the greatest British actors, Mark Rylance, Oscar winner, is a suit maker. He doesn't like being called a tailor. I think he's a cutter or something like that. And he washes up from the UK under mysterious circumstances and operates this suit shop in Chicago at the point where the Chicago mob is about to go to war. They like using his suit shop. They use it as a drop-off and a way station to send messages to the big Chicago outfit. And there's a romance between his staff member, a female, and the son, I think, or at least one of the top-ranking people in the mafia people that are around him. And the story is very unexpected in the way it plans out. It starts off in one vein and moves over the course of the whole movie to another. It already achieves what it needs to be like this really intense drama. And it then blows apart in the final third to make you actually want a sequel. I wanted more of Mark Rylance's world. You hear about his past, and it's a lot more dynamic and exciting than you've been led to believe. Beautifully held, does never look like it's shot in one room. It's in a fantastic environment. It's really strong performances in it. Zoe Deutsch, Johnny Flynn, Dylan O'Brien's really good in it. Directed by Graham Moore. I really like that. And that's my 8th best film of the year. At number 7, Top Gun. It did everything it said on the tin. It was a tent pole, a flag for everyone that ever tries to do a remake of anything, because they did every single thing right. In fact, I got really annoyed by it ending not on Take My Breath Away by Berlin. It was the perfect moment to play that song. They introduced a Lady Gaga song that felt like it should be in the Fast and the Furious. Aesthetically, that was the only thing wrong with the movie. It plods around a bit. Tom Cruise is excellent. He has become a consummate lead guy. He's dropped the snark for a much more humble person, and his relationship with Jennifer Garner was a lot more affecting. Val Kilmer showed up very ill, and the final third was went gangbusters. They can film jet fighter sequences way better than the first film. The first film, I think, is iconic but dire. It's a terrible, terrible film. But I thought this one was much better and did everything right. even seeing Jerry Bruckheimer on the screen at the start with Danger Zone playing was magnificent. You know, it almost sent tingles down you, because I grew up going to the cinema in that Rocky 3 Top Gun era, which is when people used to queue round the block and not get into a film. So it really did. It hit a lot of points. It thumbed its nose at home viewing by its deafening cacophony and widescreen cinematography, everything that a cinema film should be about, and the biggest box office draw of the year, and one that hasn't been Marvel for the first time in God knows how long. So very appreciative of Top Gun. And finally, in our list, it's Prey. I am a sad sack for the Predator movies. I think they're very underappreciated. Even the ones that are only, 6 or 7 out of 10 good, I still think have got a lot going for them. There's only been a couple that I think are really bad, and there's a lot more than you think. Predator 2 was amazing, and that got trashed on release, but that was really, really good. And the one set in where they find a massive, the first Predator Alien one where they find a massive underground spaceship, was visually the best of the whole lot. And I didn't hate the comeback one from about maybe 5 years ago, which I think was called The Predator, but relocating it to Native America on the cusp of colonialism was a masterstroke like any this year. And it immediately set people going, where should we send the Predator next? What point in history do we want to see fighting a Predator? Amber Midthunder, brilliant. A lot of people didn't understand her. Oh, why did she beat a Predator? The whole purpose of, well, for one thing, the Predator got beaten by everyone because there were a lot of people involved. But her character was not having the brawns but having the brain. That was the whole point of the movie. Really, really good, exciting, fast, beautifully shot. Lots of cool sequences like the misty stuff at the end, in that midsection at the end. And Amber Midthunder was perfect. What a name, what a film, terrific. My 6th best film of the year. So these are my 10 worst films of the year. It's important to note my criteria for worst, as it's very specific. If I watch a load of indie budget films that have no money spent on them and they're terrible, and I give them a 1 out of 10, they genuinely don't make the list because they aren't interesting enough to be awful. They're just terrible films. Usually they're big films. There are criteria that have to be met. One is a massive letdown. Tenet was my worst film of the year a few years back. June was my worst film of the year maybe last year. Due to directors that have previously been amazing really going off the boil. June again. If a film has got a claim that I think is terrible, that will get it in the list. And June ending up with so many Oscars, even for the soundtrack, was awful. Even the cinematography wasn't great. So if it's a really big film that gets a lot of people saying it's good, and it isn't, then that will get it in the list as well. So a criteria based around general praise and also somebody that has previously been great. That's a long way to making this list. At number 10, nothing of the sort. Uncharted is my 10th worst film of the year. It's kind of everything that kind of movie does badly. It's very cynical. Tom Holland, Mark Wahlberg have so little chemistry. Nothing is funny. It relies on bombast continually. There's no development. It is a computer game film, I think, from a much more lauded raft of computer games than the movie. And it was painful to get through. It wasn't like some of the films I've seen this year that had moments like The Grey Man. It wasn't a good film, but there were sequences where I was involved in the characters. There was a bit of spark in the dialogue between them. None of that really happens in Uncharted. It is really put together by committee. At 9, a real sad one, The Batman is my 9th worst film of the year. I really appreciate what they were doing. They should just let up on this superhero stuff. I wish they'd stop making them, but stop recasting the same people. Like the Spider-Man and Batman characters have been so recast. Was anyone really wanting a new Batman? Robert Pattinson's one of the great actors of the modern era. I think he's proven that over and over again for me. From Good Times to The Lighthouse to a number of really applauded performances. The Barbarians one, no one saw that. That came out last year as well. He's always good. He didn't have anything to go on here. The Agatha Christie whodunit murder story in The Batman is by far the best thing about it, which lasts for 2/3 of the film, and the cinematography and look as well is fantastic. There's surface level noise in the writing. The script is appalling. A lot of the dialogue is really bad. And Robert Pattinson's character had virtually nothing to do. And all of this was compounded by the fact that when the villain is revealed in that sort of 2/3 of the way through the film moment, he is incredibly dull, almost like a villain from years ago in a film when they first got the internet in movies. It's a really dull concept of a character. And then the final hour in this 3-hour movie, which is after the villain has been dealt with in his own way, is dire. It's like comparing it to the Christopher Nolan films is shocking, because not only is the Nolan films populated by instantly memorable actors and characters that are really well drawn where no one is here at all. The destruction part of that final third is so wet compared to what Nolan can do. Even the Schneider cut I gave a really good review to. The usage of Batman in that was so much better. It was a real damp squib of a movie. And number 8, the Marvel Phase 2, or whatever phase we're up to here, has just been relentlessly bad. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness took a once very appealing Benedict Cumberbatch character who was great in the first film and great in the Avengers movie, really neutered in Spider-Man Far From Home, and that's the character I felt like I got here. A nothing character, like Elizabeth Olsen was the saving grace of the film. It didn't make good use of the multiverse concept at all, which a film later on in the list does very, very well and shows a clean pair of heels to this on every level. So it was a real letdown. The Adam Project, like a 1980s Disney sci-fi film made into a modern era, belongs in that realm of like Ender's Game or Tomorrowland of films that will just get forgotten about. And at number 6, the tragedy of Taiki's Thor Ragnarok was the breath of fresh air in the Marvel universe, and Thor Love and Thunder was the unbelievable collapse. A very strange film. The first half of the film, which is in this really awful, grating, comedic Technicolor vibe, is the worst of any Marvel film. Yeah, at the start we get a really good sequence with Christian Bale, and from the halfway point we get this really good, like the story arc of Christian Bale and Natalie Portman and the way it resolves is really good and moving and has a lot of weight to it. It's just this whole sort of first sort of 60% of the film that is so hard to get through, because it's like someone else took over at the halfway stage. The cinematography changes, like the look and feel of the film completely changes for that final third, just over a third, maybe 40% of the film, where it gets really good. So Thor Love and Thunder is my 6th worst film of the year. And 5, it's another big budget film. Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore. For me, this was a trilogy that did everything wrong. For a start, the lead character never had any agency from the word go. He was a voyeur. Harry Potter had this incredibly entwined relationship. The baddie was going to kill him. That was from the word go. He was entwined in that story. The Eddie Redmayne's character, and I found him really gratingly annoying. He may as well not have been in the films, and the concept of the Fantastic Beasts may as well not have been in the films, as they were put on the back burner for a retread of a faux Harry Potter story with a replacement for Voldemort and a replacement for Harry Potter. I didn't mind the second film. I actually appreciated the Johnny Depp character, and the fact that he was a credible fascist. He was like, it was almost like I believed him. I believed that he was doing everything for the good of everyone. But then that all changed with the third film. Johnny Depp was booted, and they brought in the brilliant Mads Mikkelsen, one of the great actors of the modern era, but completely reframed the character to being much more about his own sort of personal whimsy, which was a really bad move. I felt no connection with the previous movies at all. There was very little purpose to any of it. The narrative didn't stick. It felt like they were retreading the final battle with Voldemort an awful lot, which amplified how nondescript everything was. It didn't hold together. The lead character was purposeless, and the disjointedness of that break between the Johnny Depp era and the Mads Mikkelsen era was huge. Like, everything sort of felt different. But it wasn't feeling enough anyway. So a really poor effort and a really poor trilogy. At number 4, Ambulance, which is, who is that? Really annoying director that has occasionally looked like they might actually make a good film every now and again. Starring Jake Gyllenhaal in his worst ever role. Writing aside, he's terrible in a film. And it's a Michael Bay film, and the other guy, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, is useless. I like Isa Gomez. I like Gonzalez. I've liked her in other films as well. Nothing means anything in this film. Like, the whole sort of trajectory of the first third through the bank robbery and everything just shows how completely disposable everyone in the whole film is. It doesn't mean anything. Some of the stuff that happens in the ambulance after about an hour of the film being on is pretty decent, but it suffers from everything that Michael Bay does bad, which is really aggressive over-editing, cameras that cannot stop spinning around and around, 10 edits for every second, just really grating on your brain like Gabba, if you know that kind of music, road drill filmmaking at its worst, and with no substance at all. A really bad film. At number 3, Backlight, which was a Liam Neeson thriller. I've gone on at length how I loved that mid-period of Liam Neeson post-Taken films, which got up to the likes of Cold Pursuit and Run All Night, which were magnificent, and how badly back down to earth he's come. Ice Road was in my top 3 worst films, I think, last year, and I could have picked almost anything he made. The Marksman I've got time for, that was all right. This one, again, it's got money spent on it, yet it feels like a disjointed film that was made for a couple of million. Pretty much everything about it sucked. At number 2 is Beast. I'll try and look up some info on this last couple. So Beast was a film starring Idris Elba. Actually, I don't need to look it up. As a guy that goes to Africa with his very, very poorly played daughters. Their acting is atrocious. And they get trapped in a car, stalked by a lion. That is the film. And I don't know if they could have done it worse. Like, even in the African savannah, it looks like a quarry pit. It looks like they've just driven around the back of the film lot and there's some mud and hills, and that's about it. It's atrocious on every level, and I gave it a 0 out of 10. The first one, the only one out of all the films I've reviewed this year to get a 0. It is genuinely atrocious on every level. Nothing redeemable, no excitement. The CGI of the lion isn't atrocious, is the best thing I can say about it. It's awful. So we get to my number one worst film of the year. And if you remember at the start, I said expectation, being let down, acclaim when it's undeserved. It's my number one worst film of the year is Nope by Jordan Peele. So Jordan Peele arrived on the scene with Get Out and, or at least arrived to a wide international audience with Get Out. And that was, at the time it was brilliant. When I went back and watched it not that long ago, I was surprised by how ordinary it was. It wasn't as polemic or as daring as I remembered it. Still a really passable film. Daniel Kaluuya is, I think, the best actor in his class from that age range in the UK. Brilliant in everything. And the follow-up, Us, I thought was a much more interesting film. I thought the middle third really brought it down to earth with a bang. It didn't work at all, but the first and the last third were brilliant, really challenging, really ambitious, and I really wanted to see where the director went with this. I guess I should have been tipped off by Candyman, which was written by Jordan Peele and was, I thought, atrocious. The reboot of Candyman. So this came out and it was a very mysterious film. No one knew what it was about. Daniel Kaluuya is on a ranch in the middle of nowhere. His dad's been killed by a mysterious event. His sister's played by Keke Palmer. And they're running out of money. He's a horse trainer. And it becomes a Close Encounters of the Third Kind sort of movie as it progresses. It is near the top of some critics' lists. Everything about it is bad, apart from the cinematography, which is excellent, of these wide open ranges at night and stuff like that. The only interesting part in it is Steve Ewan's character and the whole chimpanzee. I read a review of this film, and I totally agree with this point. There's a sub-story in here about a chimp that is on a sitcom in the 90s that goes on a rampage and kills the cast, leaving one alive. And Steve Ewan was, I think, the one left alive, and he was a child actor, and now he's an adult, and he's a rancher who's got a lot of money and puts on like fairground ranch attractions and so on. His whole story, you kept wanting the camera to just pan away from this really crap Daniel Kaluuya storyline and onto the Steve Ewan storyline, because that was so much more interesting. It's like it's got a much better film inside the film. It's very boring. It's very empty. It's very superficial. The alien actually made me laugh at times. The production design was either quite good. I like the use of the flailing arm inflatable tube people, or it was atrocious, and I actually laughed at the alien. It looked like a collection of bed sheets. Keke Palmer, I think every character in this, apart from Steve Ewan, really struggles with the fact that they didn't bother writing any characters for this film. And hers comes across as incredibly try-hard and grating, which was not good. And Daniel Kaluuya, I've never seen him bored in a film before. He is bored out of his mind in this film. It is very quiet and dull, and that doesn't equate to meaningful. It is atrocious. It is the Emperor's New Clothes of the year. The fact that some critics have actually pretended to see good in it is quite cringe-inducing. I don't know why critics can't be honest, but they haven't. So, 40% of critics have said that this is one of the greatest films of the year. It was actually quite dire. So my number one worst film of the year is Jordan Peele's Nope. We're in the top 5 of my favourite films of the year. As I mentioned, I don't see nearly everything, and I lambasted critics' lists for having 8 films I'd never even heard of in most lists, or that people couldn't even see because they were shown at a festival. So mainly pretty big films in my list. At number 5, now in recent years I have had films in my films of the year by directors I'd previously written off. Not quite got there with Wes Anderson yet, but directors I'd really hated had made one film that was great and ended up in my films of the year list. Zack Snyder, other than Watchmen, hated everything he did. I actually loved the Snyder Cut. The what's his name? Guy Ritchie. Even though Lock, Stock and Snatch were watchable, most of his films have been dire. I thought The Gentleman was great, and Even the Last Night in Soho last year, I can't remember the director's name, but fantastic. Was my second favourite film of the year. Again, at number 5 is Elvis by Baz Luhrmann. I can't stand Baz Luhrmann's films, even the ones that are supposedly good. I just don't like that whole song and dance vibe. But something like the first sort of half of The Great Gatsby is just torture for me. The superficial use of swirling cameras, trite dialogue. Elvis was fantastic. Elvis was magnificent. It was brilliant storytelling from start to finish. It earned its massive, was it 3 hours runtime? 159 minutes. Mandy Walker's cinematography was great. As far as filmmaking technique goes, actually the top 2 films are really, really good as well. But the filmmaking technique was pure artistry that I enjoyed on that level throughout the whole film. Every sort of 2 or 3 minutes was just so beautifully put together. I didn't expect it to be good. Austin Butler will probably get an Oscar nomination for his wonderful humanistic portrayal of Elvis. Tom Hanks was extremely funny. Actually, none of the characters are very well written apart from Elvis. Everyone else is superficial and surface noise, but it doesn't detract from the movie. And I think the fact is he chose a great subject at the right time, because Elvis and the Beatles were like ever present in our firmament of the biggest stars of all time. But really, Elvis fell away. He was never an albums artist like the Beatles. And once we moved into that era, there were no albums to hang on Elvis Presley. He made, 4 surf movie albums a year, and they all kind of got forgotten. So it's really interesting going through this path of his career, him having to bail and go into the army for a couple of years, the amount of abuse he got from authorities for his sexualized performance, his connection with African Americans in his style, which was again a big no-no at the time. And the real tragedy of the last sort of third of his life, where he desperately wanted to tour internationally and see the world. And I didn't know that about him, that he'd never played. I think he might have played in Canada once, but broadly speaking, he never played outside of America his whole life. And Colonel Tom Parker gets the blame squarely aimed at him. He's a fascinating man, and his story is really interesting as well, however Tom Hanks plays it. But it was beautiful filmmaking and a terrific story, and I thought the right time. So let's have a bit of a tribute. You're with Julian on the Brown Note, and we're into the top 4 of my favourite movies of the year. And Don't Look Up at number 4. A real controversy with this film. Got a lot of pasting from some critics, got wild acclaim from others. An allegory for our inaction on climate change. Most of us picked journalists reacting badly to the film in that they are squarely one of the targets, and they couldn't stomach how viciously they were attacked. I think Adam McKay is one of the most interesting directors out there at the moment. He did all of the great films with Will Ferrell: Anchorman, Talladega Nights, Step Brothers. He did The Other Guys. But then he came back with what was my film of the year, The Big Short, when that came out. A brilliant film in 2015 about the global financial crisis. State-of-the-art filmmaking, wiped the floor with Spotlight. And Vice in 2018, the story of Bush and Dick Cheney, was incredible as well. A little bit flawed and a little bit heavy-handed, but still amazing. And Don't Look Up was really heavy-handed, and it got a lot of stick. Why aren't you more polite in your invective and so on? But it was humanity being confronted by their own end, and watching Ariana Grande and just, famous scenes like Leo and how can I forget Jennifer Lawrence's name? Jennifer Lawrence. What a cast. Jonah Hill, excellent. Mark Rylance, a really great performance as a billionaire. Really scary. And Kate Blanchett was magnificent as the news anchor who tells them, keep it light when you're talking about the end of the world, which then got parlayed into actually happening in the real world in Brazil and in England, where people were confronted by scientists warning them about terrible catastrophes associated with climate change, and we're like, oh, can you keep it a bit happy? You know, we don't want to depress people, which is kind of what the whole film is about. It was, it had a fairly breakneck pace. Leo and Jennifer were amazing, and Meryl Streep as the president as well. She was fantastic. Really funny often, and really dark and rage-inducing. A really magnificent film, I thought. Lots of flaws, but overall, I just thought it pushed so many buttons that people didn't really want pressed. It seems in the press. That was my fourth best film of the year, and at number 3, Nightmare Alley, which is a film that has actually. I was very surprised when it got nominated for multiple Oscars. Guillermo del Toro's latest film. Now, last decade, half of the Best Director Oscars were won by Mexicans. Everyone talks about Southeast Asian filmmaking, Korean filmmaking, post-Parasite filmmaking, and so on. Half the winners of Best Director last decade were Mexican. And Cuarón and Del Toro for The Shape of Water, a film that I thought was actually not great. I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was great. And I thought it was like a really watered down version of something like Pan's Labyrinth with White the Floor with it. But Nightmare Alley, I really liked. A really dark tale of people on the margins of society, alcoholics that wash up in these carnivals traveling America. The production design on it was absolutely top drawer. It looked incredible. Bradley Cooper is this drifter that ends up, learning mind powers. He learns how to read people. And with Rooney Mara, they set up shop and become really rich and famous, being able to pretend that they're mind readers, but actually using a lot of cues and the odd cheat here and there to reference what's going on in a room and be able to say this about you and that about you. It had a lot of symbolic meaning. It had a lot of really interesting characters along the way. Toni Collette, Willem Dafoe, Ron Perlman, David Strathairn was great as well. Strathairn. Great cast, beautiful to look at, incredible production design, really thick atmosphere. And again, was it Cate Blanchett turning up again? Well, she was fantastic as well. And the whole thing is sort of spiraled towards this horrifically dark ending. I'm not surprised it wasn't bigger at the box office. It was a box office bomb. But, it was great. 4 noms at the Academy Awards, including Best Picture. I thought it was a really, really great film. At number 3 in my list is You're with Julian on the Brown Note, and I can't play music from the soundtrack of this next film. It's just killing me as it's the soundtrack of the year. My second favourite film of the year, the top 2 films I gave 9.5 out of 10 to. Most years, that is a sure win. And I don't know that I've ever given 2 films 9.5 out of 10. Robert Eggers lays a claim to being the most exciting and brilliant director out there at the moment. He did The Witch, which was an absolute masterpiece. A24, arguably, alongside Hereditary, arguably their finest film. The Lighthouse, I thought was a tad overrated in the acclaim, but still a magnificent film. And The Northman, which came out this year, is my second best film of the year. It took me a while watching it because I didn't know a lot about it, and I started thinking, God, this is like Hamlet. Well, of course it's like Hamlet. So Alexander Skarsgård, who has gone from being a perfunctory beefcake to being a really good actor, it's a project where he connects with his Nordic roots, and the story of Amleth, the legend, from 900 AD or whenever it was first sort of became one of the most celebrated stories in the Nordic canon, was written again by Shakespeare as Hamlet. And The Northman is the finest screen version of Hamlet, hands down. Better, I think, than the 1940s Best Picture winner. It's a fantastic film. The atmosphere is thick throughout. It's take no prisoners. The music, which I wanted to play you, by Robert Carolan, Sebastian Gainsborough, is just magnificent, from tribal drumming to these very sort of medieval clanking noises. It's fantastic throughout. The cinematography by Jarin Blaschke is absolutely wonderful. Nicole Kidman should have been up for some awards here. I think, unlike my number one film, and indeed my number three film, Nightmare Alley, I get a feeling this is going to be bypassed by the Oscars. But as far as screenplay, direction, and Nicole Kidman and the soundtrack should all, and they should all be nominated for Oscars. Absolutely magnificent film. It blends in the whole Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings universe with the whole sort of Shakespearean universe. It's really dark and brutal. It's a great story. A more exciting story, in fact, than the one that Shakespeare offered. It's a lot more sort of dynamic and tactile. And the environments are thrilling. The historical setting is wonderful. The Berserkers sequence as well, where they raid a village. It's got some amazing sequences, some incredible visual sequences as well. And the whole thing sort of relocates from Denmark to Iceland. And the vistas are incredible. And Anya Taylor-Joy, obviously it girl at the moment as far as actresses go. She was great in Amsterdam. She was in my second best film last year, Last Night in Soho. She just shows up everywhere and is really good here as well. Nicole Kidman has a scene for the ages towards the end of the film. She plays Hamlet's mother, or Amlet, and has a scene that is just phenomenal. She is incredible in that one sequence where the whole world turns. It's just amazing. Willem Dafoe, Ethan Hawke turn up. Bjork turns up for a very sort of mystical, cerebral moment. I love the mythology. I thought everything worked really well. And the end, you've got naked men fighting on a volcano, like at the end. If you can imagine Frodo and Gollum naked fighting in a volcano, is kind of there. I thought it was absolutely magnificent. So that's my second favourite film of the year. So my top 10 films of the year, and we will have some music from number one. At number 10, The Curse, Crimes of the Future at 9, The Outfit at 8, Top Gun at 7, Prey at 6, Elvis at 5, Don't Look Up at 4, Nightmare Alley at 3, and The Northman at number 2. And my number one film of the year also got 9.5 out of 10, though I was mulling giving it 10. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once better get its dues this award season, particularly from the star, the incredible Michelle Yeoh, who gives a defining career, awards-worthy as a comedic actress in this film, awards-worthy as an action star in this film, and awards-worthy as a dramatic actress in this film. She is phenomenal. The story uses a multiverse so much better than Doctor Strange does. In this one, the thing that really got me about this film, well, for a start, you don't know what's happening for half an hour. Just, if you've never seen it, don't read up on it. Just let it flow over you for half an hour or so, and you won't have any reference point to what's happening. She starts as this woman that's been broken down by life, that owns a laundrette, can't stand her husband, has a unruly teenage daughter, and she goes through thinking that she's made the wrong decisions in life, and that's why she's miserable and unhappy. We then get the most existential movie of the year, and one for the ages for me. It becomes a film where one person is almost trying to save another person from suicide. If you can imagine the multiverse, where there's a different version of you in every one, and you could move between them, and you discover that whatever you do, whichever choice you got left or right, whichever choices you make through your life, life is still meaningless. And you've got one side trying to convince the other side of life's purpose when they're already at that point themselves. Really, really moving, unexpectedly tear-jerkingly moving. Even two rocks sitting on a hill become tear-jerkingly moving. The most imaginative film I have seen this century. The support from Stephen Zhu. He is absolutely magnificent as the dual role of her downtrodden husband and a much more exciting version of himself from one of the other universes. And Ki Hu Kwan is the husband. Stephanie Su is the daughter in this trio of awards-worthy performances. Ki Hu Kwan is already getting awards, I think, for Best Supporting Actor. And I feel sad that Stephanie Su may not get picked up. It looks fantastic, but I stopped caring of it by Larkin Sepul, and the music by Son Lux was really good as well. Really, really good technical level. But it was the human story that pulled me in. And it's so much darker and so much more powerful on an emotional level than I thought. Way more so than any Marvel film that it is associated with. There are some really dark themes, and the whole notion of, that if I'd have done different things in my life would be happier. And knowing that you won't get any more meaning from your life, even if you'd made those choices. So how do you get happiness and meaning from this meaningless existence? It's really deep stuff. I thought it was utterly magnificent. If Michelle Yeoh gets beaten for Best Actress, it should be a Criminal Inquiry. It's looking like Cate Blanchett might be in there again. I hope she's had too many. And the veteran actress Michelle Yeoh gets her just desserts. Jamie Lee Curtis is already getting a lot of award noms. The sausage finger sequence in one of the multiverses in this film is amongst the most funny things I've ever seen. It's hysterically funny. It's got great action. It's got a great soundtrack, great cinematography, awards-worthy lead performances, but ultimately it's that heart and centre of the film about our existential crisis and what happens if you actually can prove that life has no meaning. Where would you go from there? I thought it was a brilliant piece of filmmaking. The two guys, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, had only really directed Swiss Army Man previously that got any sort of kudos at all. Everything Everywhere All at Once is A24, and that's what we want. So we get the producers, we get A24 with Marvel producers because it was produced by the Russo brothers, Anthony Russo and Joe Russo. And when they returned with their own film, it was everything this wasn't. It was back to being naff. I'm not sure what that film. Oh, The Grey Man, I think. But here, having them producing an A24 film was a masterstroke. So my number one film of the year, and The Northman could have easily been my film of the year, but Everything Everywhere All at Once trumps it for that incredible human emotion. A brilliant masterpiece. And from that film, a David Bowie track, as if everything about that film wasn't perfect. So I've got to the end of my torturous best and worst films of the year, won by Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, and to play us out, David Bowie.